So what happens to inherited property when a sibling dies? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota, and New York City. Today, let's look at what happens when you and your siblings own property together and one of them passes away. Who owns the property? What's going to happen with it next? As you can imagine, this is a very common situation where you have brothers and sisters and you've inherited property from your family, usually from your parents. Let's say it's a vacation cabin up north and you are now owning it together with your brothers and sisters. If your parents have done some planning, maybe they put that property into a trust, maybe they put that property into an LLC, and in that case then the concerns we're going to have in this video may not actually flow through to you. However, in many situations, that property is given to you by a transfer on death deed, or you inherit it under a will so that you and your siblings now own this property together. And in that case, then, we need to look at what the legal title is to the property in order to figure out what happens when one of the siblings dies. There's two main types of property ownership that we run into. The first is what we call joint tenancy with survivorship rights, with the right of survivorship. So in this kind of ownership structure, what that means is that if you own a property and you pass away, your share automatically goes to the other owners of the property. So we'll go back to three siblings. We have Jane and John and Steve. So Jane and John and Steve own a piece of property together with the right of survivorship. Now, if Jane dies, that means her two siblings now own that property as 50-50 owners. And if another one of them dies, then what happens is that last surviving sibling is the one who owns the property. Now, the upside of this is that it's going to avoid any probate court problems. So instead of having to pass any interest under a will or have to go through court, what happens is when one party passes away, their share automatically goes to the other owners. We will have an issue at the end when the last surviving sibling passes away, in which case the property will then pass under their will. But you can probably guess then this becomes a challenge if we have three siblings and we have a right of survivorship. Those first two siblings to pass away, their children, if they had family, are not going to inherit anything out of that property. Unfortunately, it's whichever sibling lives the longest will be the one who owns the property at the end. So this is a big challenge we can have in the estate planning world. If we have the right of survivorship for these three siblings, you almost have a game to see who can survive longest. Which of these siblings lives longest, because they will be the one, and then also their family, hopefully under their will be the ones who are able to enjoy that property going forward. The other way we can own property is what we call tenancy in common. So in tenancy in common, each person owns a specific share. So let's go back to our three siblings, and we'll say each sibling now owns 1/3 apiece. So if one of those siblings passes away, their 1/3 share can then be distributed to their children, to their spouse. It can stay in their family. Or frankly, they can have a will that says, if I pass away, my share goes to my brother and sister. But with a tenancy in common, it's like cutting up a piece of pie. We have three different pieces, and if somebody passes away, we just need to decide what to do with that piece of pie that they previously owned. Another advantage of tenancy in common is that we can do an unequal ownership structure, meaning that one sibling can have 50%, the other two can have 25%, whereas in that right of survivorship situation, they're equal interests in the property, so that if you have three, everyone has 1/3. Well, they're down to 50% each, and then when there's one living sibling, it's 100%. So the upside to having a tenancy in common is you have much more control over an inheritance. As I said, we can make sure we leave your share to your children, to your family, so it doesn't just expire when you expire. The downside is your share can then be subject to a probate court. We may have legal proceedings. There can be a variety of legal things we have to do with your share once you've passed away. It's important for you and your family to understand how you actually own that property. It's a very common situation that I will sit down and meet with families. In a situation like this, where we have multiple siblings owning the property, one of them passes away and we're not sure what to do next. And of course, everyone thinks, oh, their share goes on to their wife or it goes on to their kids. And then we later find out that actually the deed had a right of survivorship, and that sibling who passed away, their interest is now gone and transferred immediately to their siblings. So it's very important that we understand how you're actually holding title, and the place we look to is the deed. Without the deed, we're not sure exactly what the property ownership structure looks like. Again, many people believe that they share this property equally with their siblings, only to find out later that maybe it was 50% to your brother, 25% to you and your sister. The way we get around all this is simple. We have estate planning. So what we want to do is make sure we have a will in place that says what's going to happen to these properties. If the will is from your parents and it's going to be distributing it to your siblings, we need to know how they want to distribute it. Is it going to be with that right of survivorship? Is it going to be tenancy in common? And we want to make sure we're checking the deed to the property as we go down this road so we know what we're dealing with and what everybody's interest is. We also want to make sure we have a plan for this property, again, taking that estate planning concept and making sure your documents are clear on what we're going to do with the property after you're gone. And finally, we also want to make sure we're talking to your siblings. So you may believe the property is owned one way, your sister may think it's something different. It's important as a family to understand how these properties are owned and what should happen after somebody passes away. If you've got more questions or you'd like to talk further about property that you've inherited, you can go to my website, 𝙃𝙀𝙍𝙀𝙁. There's a red legal strategy session button on the front page. If you click it, you'll be taken to my personal scheduling page. We can set up a 15 or 20-minute phone call free of charge to discuss the situation for you and your family and make sure you understand these different ownership structures. This is one of the most common headaches I see with families who have inherited property from their parents. And the first place to start, make sure you check that deed to understand what you're actually dealing with.